Okay, the next song I'm going to teach you guys is Shock Me. It was on the Love Gun album. I wrote it in 1976 and I recorded it in 1977 with Kiss. And it's one of my signature songs. It was pretty much inspired by an incident that happened in Lakeland, Florida in 1976 where I was electrocuted on stage and luckily survived. And it was a very shocking experience. It was the beginning of the show and I was coming up the back of the amps. You know, we had a staircase in the back and we had a staircase in the front. You know, it was like 4 stacks of Marshalls, and as I got to the top, I started descending on the railing and it wasn't grounded properly, and I got zapped with 220 volts. You know, thank God I fell backwards instead of forwards, because I got to plunge 20 feet down and probably broke my head open. I was knocked out for a while. I had burns on my fingertips, but I guess my guardian angel was watching over me that night. I was backstage, they revived me, and I couldn't play. We were gonna cancel the show, and kids started chanting my name, Ace, 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 you know, and all of a sudden, you know, everybody's going, come on, Ace, you can do it, you can do it. So I played the rest of the show, but I had no feeling in my right hand. You know, all screwed up. But, you know, the adrenaline took over at that point, and I never really talked about it before until tonight, so. You guys are privileged. Rock and roll. History. Anyway, that's the story. The tuning for this song is just like Cold Gin and most Kiss songs. We tune down a half step, which means every string is 1 half step down. So the first string, which is the E string, would be E flat, B flat. Third string, G, will be G flat. D string will be D flat. A string is A flat, and the 6th string, the low E, is E flat. To get the same sound that, you know, we get on records, you really have to tune down, because if you try playing it in a different position, you lose the whole advantage of using open strings. So you really have to tune down to play it right. A little tip from the Aster. It actually starts off with a drum beat. I don't have it. That's not gonna work. Anyway, imagine a drum fill from Peter Criss. So basically, that's an A chord with a suspension. It starts off with the suspension. And the G chord, you know, I've seen a lot of people play it. They don't play it right. I'm bending the E string from a G flat to a G. And I'm hitting the top 4 strings, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th strings, to get this effect. So it's... Then I go to a D sus. Back to the G. When I hit the G after the D chord, I'm also hitting the open G string. Back to the A. So let me recap that. It's A suspended. G. And if you can't get that bend on the, which I'm doing on the F sharp to a G, you can just play a regular G. To a D suspended. So let me play that fast. And that goes right into the first verse, which is just a power chord. D to the D suspended. So basically it's a variation of the intro riff of the verses. Okay, so this is the pre-chorus, which starts on a B with a hammer on. So I'm playing it like this. And I'm basically only using the 4th and 5th strings on the 2nd fret. And I do the same position, but then I jump to the 5th and 6th string at the F sharp to a D chord. Then I do a C on top of the D, gives it a descending bass line. So it's D to a C to a B. So if you want to get like a nice effect on that part going into the chorus, you can go. So basically, I'm just hitting the 5th string on the 3rd fret. So it's D into this chorus, which is A to G. And those chords are played very staccato. And basically, I stole them from Pete Townsend from the song Can't Explain. When I'm playing the A to G position, you know, if you guys want to do that bend, pretty much you naturally are going to mute the A string, which is the 5th string, and basically you're only ringing out the 6th, the 4th, and the 3rd string. So it's yeah, the 5th string is muted. So basically, there's only 3 strings that are ringing. That's the E string, which is bent up to a G, a D string, and the open G, which is the 3rd string. For you guys who forget to hit just the 5th string down, if you mute the E string, you don't have to worry about hitting it. Because I'm muting it with my thumb. Well, if you can remember, just hit the A string, 5th string all the way down. Which I think sounds better because you're going right off the open A string. You know, I mean, if you can't get that bend, you could just play a G chord, a standard G chord, and it'll still work. You know, so there's contrast there. The A to G is drawn out. You let the chords ring, but the D to the C position is played very staccato. So it's. Coming out of the chorus, you pedal on from the D, you pedal on up to the E chord. So let me play the full chorus again. Back into the intro riff, which preludes the 2nd verse. Let's re-examine that part. I'm playing an A sus. Then I'm bending the 6th string from a F sharp to a G. then to a D position, to a little sus, back to the F sharp to a G. And if you notice, when I'm going back to the final part of that section, I'm bending the E string to a G, and I'm also hitting an open G to an A chord. So I'll play it fast now. And that's the intro riff. That's the riff in between the verses and the choruses. And it's the part that's played under the guitar solo. So once you nail that, you got half the song, pretty much. Into the verse 2, which is a power chord. If you're playing the A position up here on the 7th fret, you know, if you kind of like wiggle your hand a little, you know, it makes the chord sound a little truer. Gives a little vibrato. B position, F sharp, D, D, second chorus. So that was the end of the second chorus. So under this part, I start the guitar solo, which goes like this. Kind of a blues lick starting on the 12th fret to a D on the B string. Then I go up to the 17th fret with a pentatonic scale. And giving it vibrato on every other bend. I go down to the 5th fret. And I do like a hammer on. That's kind of a blues lick, you know, on the 5th fret, 6th fret. And then I do these pull-offs starting on the 8th fret, from the 1st string to the 2nd string. And then I kind of speed them up. So it's which is another variation of a blues lick on the 5th fret. So from there I go to up to the 12th fret. So I'm bending up from on the E string to a F sharp. Back up to the 17th fret. Then I go down to the 10th fret. And when I'm playing it, there's a flange effect over this part, at least on the record. I don't really do it much anymore. Which is a pull-off to the 7th fret. So I'm bending from the 10th fret on the B string to to the G string on the 9th fret. Then I do this crazy kind of lick. That's pretty much the solo, I think. I just wanted to talk a little about, you know, the way I bend strings. I mean, right now I'm using a much heavier gauge string than I used when I was younger because my fingers weren't as strong. So, you know, for you guys first starting out, if you really want to bend strings, you know, you might have to go with a lighter gauge set than maybe you want to. But, you know, at least you'll be able to bend strings. But, you know, once you develop a technique, you can go to heavier strings, which actually stay in tune better and are a little brighter and richer sounding. But, you know, I basically started off by just bending, like, you know, the 2nd and 3rd strings, and, you know, just bending up to a... You know, and if you haven't developed your vibrato, you know, just practice bending up till you match the same note. So basically, you're taking the G string and you're bending it up to the same note as you're holding down on the B string. And if you add vibrato, it sounds a lot hipper. And then you can, you know, once you get that, you can start, like, you know, playing off it. You know, and then throwing in licks around it. You know, it takes practice. It took me a while. You know, a lot of my bending technique I kind of got from blues guitarists like B.B. King and you know, Eric Clapton and Beck and you know, and that, like the ending solo I do in Shock Me Live, you know, I go. So that's a combination of a bend and a pull-off. And I speed it up. And yeah. And I usually throw in pull-offs in between the bends and the other crazy stuff. But pull-off is, you know, you're doing all the work with your left hand. You don't even need a pick to do it. You know, a lot of guys make believe they're playing over their heads or picking with their teeth, and they're really just playing with their left hand. But, you know, I think developing a good vibrato is crucial for playing lead guitar, especially rock and roll. It took me a while to develop the tremolo on my index finger because pretty much you can't bend up, you got to bend down. So it's, and it's really done with the arm, not the fingers, so it's a little trickier. So when you go up, it's pretty much the muscles in your finger, but going down, it's a little tougher. I mean, you can't do it with just your finger this way. When you do it with your arm, it has a slightly different sound. You know, I can't describe it. It just does. Those little techniques that I've used through the years, and you throw them all together, and you know, you come up with something. You think you guys can handle that? Coming out of the guitar solo. That part is repeated 4 times. It's just a variation of the chorus where you just toggle back and forth from A to G. And you know, there's a couple of different positions you can play that in. You know, lately I've been kind of sliding up to a high G like this. You know, and I basically am playing an A position on the 12th fret, which is a G, and then I kind of give it a little tremolo. Sometimes I do it with, I'll hit my toggle switch to get an effect on it. If you play that part with the bending the G, E string from a F sharp to a G, it really sounds good there, especially. Back to the chorus. I think it's about 6 or 7 or 8 turnarounds, which is the chorus out. And then just, you know, since you really can't fade live, if you guys want to play this live, you just go to an A power chord on the last one, like this. Something like that, or something else. All right, well, now that I showed you all the parts to shock me, and I'm sure you've been practicing them over and over again, let's try to play the song from beginning to end. Let's just go straight through it and rock and roll. Here we go. Well, that's how you play Shock Me. You guys run with it. If you keep practicing, maybe one day you'll get as good as Ace Frehley. Okay, now I'm going to jam on this song with some special guests. This will be a real treat for you.